So we're just sitting here prepping for the podcast, reading all these new reviews we got now that we're on the Apple charts. And Tara, read, let everyone hear some of these comments.
Okay, these are pretty awesome. So, first of all, we have Annie Bits, who is calling us radically right-leaning. I'm not sure where that comes from, Stephanie. Do you?
No, but if you're radically left leaning, then I guess someone with common sense that's moderate would be radically right leaning, in your opinion, you know?
But yeah, well, this person also was very triggered by my use of the word libtard. So there's
The only
that.
person that's triggered by the word libtard would be a libtard. So,
But
okay, Annie.
I do want to say though, Annie, that you at least found us entertaining. So thanks for that. And then we have someone named Sauerkraut who called us grifters taking advantage of the political climate. Like, would you classify us as grifters having been doing this podcast for over 2 years now?
And doing it for free. Like, we don't
Yeah.
ask for shit. So screw you.
Then we have Doubting Tom Jr., who said that we are, oh, this was another one who was triggered by the word libtard and thinks that we don't take ourselves seriously.
I don't think you should take yourself too seriously. I mean, life's too short
Exactly.
for that.
I mean,
Loosen up, Tom Jr.
you guys notice we laugh a lot on this podcast, right? And then we have B Boop, who called us
That says it
uneducated.
all. B boop freaking says it all. Okay, sorry, go
Who
ahead.
called us uneducated dropouts and wants a time refund.
Time refund. Same
Time
freaking
refund.
person that's probably requesting reparations. Aren't you like
Yeah.
Ivy League educated? I mean, come on. We both
I
went
I
to
don't
college. We have
consider,
degrees.
yeah. I don't consider Berkeley Ivy League, but I do
I
have
do.
2 bachelors and a master's. So I would consider myself educated and
I would
definitely
say
not a dropout.
dropout does not qualify either one of us. So,
Yeah.
okay, B boop. Why don't you B boop on out of here? Okay. You know
So
what,
yeah.
though? I mean, I take it as a good sign because that means we're growing. We're on the
Yeah.
Apple charts now, and we're in a controversial category. So we're going to draw people from the left. And of course, they're so spiteful. They've got to leave a comment and try and take us down. So this is why we need all of our listeners, the people that actually like us and tune in to hear about what's going on in the world, to go leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Just search Unapologetically Outspoken. You scroll down, you see the 5 stars, you leave a review, and that will counteract these crazy radical left people like B Boop and help us out.
Well, two of the comments were specifically about our Project 2025 episode. So
Mhm.
obviously, like they're freaking out about that.
They were probably pissed because they were expecting us to talk about how Trump's going to end the world with Project 2025, and they got a different story, and that triggered the libtard in them.
But we are entertained. So thank you very much for your commentary. So, Stephanie, moving on, it has been a very crazy week so far. I mean, I guess more accurately, we can say it's been a crazy month because if you want to look at what's happened since the Trump Biden debate, and let's like take it back for at least the last year, right? We've been saying some shit's going to go down this summer. And I really thought it was going to be the push for this pandemic lockdown or terrorist event or another George Floyd style incident, but maybe with illegal migrant spin that would cause riots like back in 2020. And I do still think there's potential for these things to happen, one of them at least, because it's only July and we have another 3 months until the election. But then came Biden's disastrous debate performance that sent the left into a tailspin with his supporters calling for him to step down. And then, just as that whole narrative was gaining traction, there's an assassination attempt on Trump, and the whole world immediately shifts away from Biden and has been focused on Trump and the details of the investigation. And a few days have gone by. So now all these theories and facts about the shooter and his motive and scrutiny on the Secret Service. And there's also at the same time been like this excitement in the air about Trump, especially after the whole iconic fist pump move he made right after getting shot. And then 2 days later, on Monday, his classified documents case gets dismissed, which was awesome. And it's actually pretty significant. And we're going to talk about that later. But it's like the tides are turning, right? And all signs are pointing toward it being like a slam dunk for Trump to win, unless there's some serious election fraud or something unexpected happens. And then on Monday night, Trump announces his VP pick. And Stephanie, I have to admit, I initially felt a little flat. Like my Trump high deflated a little bit when he announced that it was going to be JD Vance. And I need to preface this conversation by saying I am in no way talking shit about JD Vance. I have nothing negative to say about him. I respect his platform. I truly like and agree with his politics. I love that he has a populist stance because that's what I'm all about. And I think he would actually do an incredible job as Trump's VP. But at the same time, I don't know if Trump choosing JD as his running mate was really the smartest move in terms of appealing to the demographic that's on the fence with their vote. So like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. Like my first thoughts were like meh, like the meh emoji, like so not exciting. I think this was like the least exciting choice. And then I was just thinking if he wanted someone young, he could have just gone with Vivek, who already got so much, support. And it turns out that JD Vance and Vivek are friends and they like went to law school together and like hung out and everything else. So that was interesting. I personally was really hoping for Tulsi Gabbard or Ben Carson or Tim Scott. I mean, those were all like on the list.
Ben
And they would have,
Carson was my pick.
yes, everyone loves Ben Carson. And I'm like, that I think would have appealed to more of like the swing voters or the independents. And all I could think of when I heard JD Vance was like, oh, is that the eyeliner guy? Like, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, Tara, but like, I swear, every time I look at him, I'm like, is he wearing eyeliner? And like, for the record, I don't think he's actually wearing eyeliner. But it's just me being super like critical. Because it does kind of look like he has eyeliner, or like maybe his eyes are darker, but then
He's
his hair is
pretty.
lighter. So
He's
yeah,
got the pretty look.
yeah, yeah, pretty boy. So I don't know, like that's the first thing that came. But once I got past the eyeliner, I thought like great, another typical like white male Republican, which I don't think is going to help with people that need their opinions changed. Um and so I was at my dad's house last night and he's like super mainstream media. Every night we got to watch the nightly news. So he had that on and they were at the RNC and they were talking about how Vance was not a fan of Trump. And he was actually, I didn't know this, but he was very critical of Trump at one point in time and very outspoken about that. And so the anchors were talking about that very favorably, almost like they thought this was a good choice because, maybe like I don't know if they were trying to say he'll keep Trump in check. Um, but it was like maybe it shows the never Trumpers that you can change your mind after all. And like hearing from someone who was very against Trump in the beginning, like could win some people over. And the reason why I think that is because I felt like it was winning over these mainstream media news anchors that are normally very critical. So I thought like, okay, that could have been a very strategic move on the part of Trump. And I guess Don Jr. was really pushing for JD Vance. And I don't know if people know this, but I love Don Jr. I think he's absolutely amazing. But Tara, like as the night went on, you want to know what won my heart over?
What?
I found out that the movie on Netflix, Hillbilly Elegy, that I watched like when it first came out, is based off of JD Vance's memoir. I
Yeah.
did not know that. I didn't even know who JD Vance was when it came out. And I instantly fell in love with him. And that's when I realized what Trump sees in him. And so I actually watched it again last night on Netflix. And I do recommend everyone watch it. Like it's one of those movies where you get the goosebumps. I like literally was crying my eyes out like throughout the whole thing, but not in like a sad way. It's like there's sad parts of it, but it very much represents the American dream, like what America's all about. Like he grew up in poverty in the middle of nowhere, like he had a drug addicted mother, and he, despite every single obstacle, he like had a fork in the road and he could have gone where everyone thought he would, which would have been drugs and violence and everything else. And he kind of started out that way. But then he switched and he paved his way all the way to Washington, D.C. as a senator and now VP. And it gives you goosebumps. And I think if he leans into his personal story, I think he'll touch the hearts of every person in America and kind of like revive what Trump always talks about like the American dream, make America great again. It like reminds you of what we grew up with, which was that America represents the land of opportunity for all. And if you want it, you can have it. And I think he can speak very much to not just the middle class, but the lower class, because he's from there. He is from like the bottom of the barrel. I mean, grew up in with all sorts of horrendous circumstances. And I think if he can lean into that and share his story instead of like just sticking to conservative talking points, I think they'll win by a landslide.
Well, he is kind of moderate because after this decision came out, I started like reading a ton of shit about him. And you're right, he was critical of Trump, but that was actually before the 2016 election.
Oh,
And
okay. See, I
he
don't know
said,
any of that.
yeah, he said that after watching what Trump did for the country when he was president, that's when he became a fan and a supporter of Trump. So he voted for him in 2020. And like ever since Trump's first presidency, he's been a supporter. And but here's like this is why I'm questioning him as the pick, right? Like I initially said, I have nothing negative to say. He's a strong candidate. I agree with you. His story is totally inspiring. He appeals to the middle and the lower class. But so does Trump. Like he already has that audience, especially the middle class and the working class. Like that's the heart of the MAGA movement, right? And so is JD Vance going to appeal to the independents or the moderate Democrats that don't necessarily want to vote for Biden, but they don't really want to vote for Trump? Like, is he being the VP candidate going to make a difference with any of the voter base that I think Trump still needs to win over? And so obviously, the big topics for some of these voters is abortion and the war in Ukraine. So back in 2022, Vance said he would back a national ban on abortion after 15 weeks. And most recently, he told CBS News in May that he's pro-life and he thinks it's reasonable to ban late-term abortions, except in certain circumstances. He has openly said he opposes sending more aid to Ukraine. In April, he actually wrote an op-ed in the New York Times where he said Ukraine's basically not going to win the war, and the United States doesn't have the manufacturing capacity to make up for Ukraine's lack of manpower and firepower. He spoke out at the Munich Security Conference back in February and advocated for engaging in diplomacy efforts with Putin. He's only been a senator for a year and a half, and the guy's 39. So he's pretty young in the scheme of things, which I think is what this country needs instead of one of these, lifers that's been in Congress for 40 years. And I love that he was one of the 6 senators who introduced the bipartisan rail safety legislation back in 2023 after the East Palestine train derailment. Gosh, I can't speak today. I'm on my third cup of coffee. Derailment.
Doing
So, I
great.
mean,
Doing great.
I guess we'll see how this plays out. And again, I think he's a good pick. I just think we're missing a demographic.
I think so too. I forgot about the point that he's 39. I do think that was very strategic because we've talked about this before on the podcast, but there's so many calls for like young blood, especially in the RNC, getting rid of like these rhinos, bringing in young people. So I think that'll be favorable. But something that I was thinking about last night with regards to Ben Carson and Tulsi and Tim Scott and like all these other people is I guarantee those people will be strategically
Cabinet.
put in Trump's cabinet.
Yeah.
And I think RFK too, because if you remember when Trump was president, he put RFK Jr. in charge of vaccines and in charge of going after Fauci. I think he'll sick him on Fauci again. And I do think that they will have more power in that way. The vice president's important because obviously if something happens to the president, which I mean, my God, they have to be in that spot. But the cabinet pick can really like transform the country. And I was thinking about that. What made me think about it was when I heard that Vivek was friends with JD Vance. And I remember the very first time I ever heard Vivek speak. he was talking about how if he gets in, he's going to eliminate the Department of Education. And he had an entire plan on giving the funding to the parents of the children to choose where their kids go to school. And I was like, that I want that. And when I heard that, I thought, whoever gets in, if Trump gets in, he needs to put him in charge of the Department of Education and like that whole reform. And maybe
Mhm.
that's what he's planning. I don't know, but I think that would be like a better use of some of these people.
Yeah, I hope that's in the cards, and I guess we'll see. But let's see, like what else? The other breaking news from Monday, we had Judge Eileen Cannon dismissing the classified documents case from 2022. Remember, this is when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago. And Trump was facing 37 felony charges, and the DOJ was alleging that he mishandled all these classified documents. And the decision to dismiss was based on the fact that special counsel Jack Smith's appointment in overseeing the case was a violation of the appointments clause in the Constitution because he was not appointed by the president or confirmed in the Senate for the role of special counsel. And Judge Cannon basically said that this effectively like usurped important legislative authority away from Congress, instead gave it to the head of the department. And she said this was a threat to the structural liberty inherent in the separation of powers. So I want to play this clip from Megyn Kelly because she breaks down why this ruling is significant.
It's basically just a separations of powers thing. It says, the court says, look, it's the president who gets to appoint people to these positions, special counsel or U.S. attorney, that kind of thing. And then the Congress weighs in with the confirmation. And only for inferior offices can Congress create, a process that might look a little different. And that didn't happen here. So Jack Smith has not been nominated by President Biden to do anything, nor any president prior, for this appointment. And certainly hasn't been confirmed by the U.S. Congress, and nobody authorized payment to him, and the Congress controls the purse strings. So all of this is extra legal. It's extra constitutional, which means it's unconstitutional. But the thing is, Dave, other courts have taken a look at this argument in the past, and it does appear that Judge Aileen Cannon is one of the few to find this way, right? Other courts have been like, yeah, no, it's not a problem. She's saying, you know what, it is a problem. And while she may look like a bit of an outlier, she's got something very helpful in her back pocket. And that is Clarence Thomas's concurrence in the decision finding Trump has immunity for most of the things alleged against him, which we read to our audience when it happened, as a very important piece of what might happen in getting rid of the Mar-a-Lago case. And sure enough, Judge Cannon saw it, raised it, and felt as he did.
Okay.
I think it's great. Like I'm grinning ear to ear. I think the other cases, whatever's left, like the January 6th charges, I think those will be dropped too because it looks really bad. Looks really bad, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, here's what Trump said after this decision was announced. He went on Truth Social and he posted, quote, "As we move forward in uniting our nation after the horrific events on Saturday, this dismissal of the lawless indictment in Florida should be just the first step, followed quickly by the dismissal of all the witch hunts, the January 6th hoax in Washington, D.C., the Manhattan DA's zombie case, the New York AG scam, fake claims about a woman I never met, with a decades-old photo in line with her then husband does not count, and the Georgia, quote, perfect phone call charges. The Democrat Justice Department coordinated all of these political attacks, which are an election interference conspiracy against Joe Biden's political opponent, me. Let us come together to end all weaponization of our justice system and make America great again."
Can I just say I am so freaking happy with Trump and how he's responded. Like he could have gone full force attack mode and he is being very classy, very much a positive and unification message instead of going after them. And he doesn't have to because all of his followers, I mean, there's memes everywhere about the lawfare and how, they tried to get him this way and that way, and then they tried to kill him. So, like, I think if he keeps this going, it's really speaking to those swing voters when he's not showing like the angry orange man kind of thing that they have in their mind about why they don't like Trump. And again, like, I think if I had to bet money, I think all of the charges are going to disappear because it further highlights the attacks against Trump that led to the attack on his life. And that's not a good look for Biden in a campaign. And as they say, karma's a bitch, and Biden's paying the price now.
Yeah, and speaking of all that, so now we have all these details unfolding with the investigation into the assassination attempt on Trump. And Stephanie, I swear, the more we learn, the more and more it's looking shady.
Yeah. Okay. So for anyone that's not on TikTok or social media, like the thing that is taking the internet by storm is that Trump's shooter was in a Blackrock commercial. Okay, and this is confirmed. It is confirmed. Blackrock confirmed it. BlackRock has since taken down the video, and they released a statement saying, quote, "In 2022, we ran an ad featuring a teacher from Bethel Park High School in which several unpaid students briefly appeared in the background, including Thomas Matthew Crooks." And so they released this statement to Reuters on Sunday, and they added that the ad had been pulled. Okay, so I'm going to go conspiracy mode for a minute, but just hear me out because this is some crazy, crazy shit. So our girl Shipwreck that we had on the podcast a few weeks ago, she did some digging, and I did some more digging after I saw her digging. And oh my God, okay, buckle up. The shooter was on that building. Everyone's talking about that building and like, how the hell did he get on that roof undetected, right? So the building is owned by a company called American Glass Research. Now, everyone knows, like, that's in the secret service world, and I know this from seeing all these interviews over the past few days. They've been saying how there's no way the shooter ever should have been able to get to that building unnoticed unless he had access from the inside to the roof. So that's important, right? So Shipwreck found out that American Glass Research was bought by a company called Indicor Solutions in March, just a few months ago, 4 months ago. Okay. Indicor is a company that was created in 2022, same year of the BlackRock commercial. And Indicor is a private company. But if you go on and research, they have two major investors. So this is what I found. One of the investors is called Roper Technologies. And who's one of the top shareholders? BlackRock. BlackRock owns a huge portion of this company. So I know I sound like a conspiracy nut, and I get that BlackRock owns everything, so that we have to throw that into the mix. But you know, I don't believe in coincidences. So I want to break it down and point out how many coincidences we have to believe in this scenario. So first of all, I was going to play a clip from a trained sniper that laid a lot of things out about the Secret Service, but TikTok took his video down. So I'll just kind of summarize. In the video, he explained that the Secret Service goes through like so many protocols months before an event. So months before Trump ever gets to the location where he's holding a rally, they go to these locations and they do like a pre-check where they assess the threat level and they look at everything, the entire area, and they come up with their plan and they look for like vulnerabilities and things like that. So this happens months in advance. Just keep that in mind. So the first coincidence is that the building the shooter was miraculously able to get on without anyone noticing is owned by a company that was bought 4 months ago. Around the same time, the Secret Service would be doing those pre-surveillance checks of the event area. The second coincidence is that building that the shooter was on is owned by a company whose money comes from BlackRock. The third coincidence is that BlackRock featured the shooter in their ad, and this was the same year, the same time frame that this company was created, that BlackRock funded. And they now own that building that the shooter was able to get on the roof of, which would technically be the fourth coincidence. And Tara, like, I know it sounds crazy, but just think, like, if you were planning the biggest assassination attempt of our time and you had to bypass the largest security detail of all time, obviously you would plan it months in advance, and you'd get some poor dopey kid with issues to do it. And you'd make sure he has inside access to the building so he could go undetected by all of the security on the ground. And of course, I'm just throwing out hypotheticals here. Okay. So don't sue me. This is all hypothetical, but if it wasn't for that BlackRock ad with the shooter in 2022, when that company was formed, I don't think it would be bothering me so much. I mean, it's
Okay.
crazy.
Yeah, I do have one like question though. Who decided on the location for the rally? Was it Trump or was it
No,
Secret
that's
Service?
a
Like,
good question. We got to look into that because I don't know. And yeah,
I
that would
didn't
be
think
very
about it
telling.
until you were going through all this. And then I
That
was
would be
like,
very telling.
that's a lot of work to put in, but like who, when was
Well,
it
I
decided
think
that would be where it was?
I still think without a doubt there has to be a mole in the Secret Service for this to
Mhm.
go down. I mean, there's just so many other things that happened that they didn't respond well. So we'll get into that in a minute. But I just want to like talk about this hypothetical just for a minute because it had me thinking, like, why would BlackRock be involved? Why would they want to take out Donald Trump? What would be the motive there? So let's look at a New York Times headline from February 16th, 2023 that reads, quote, BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, will advise Kiev on how to structure the country's reconstruction funds, end quote. So that $138 billion of our taxpayer money that Joe Biden sent to Ukraine, along with the 10 years of funding that he's promised Ukraine, is all under the control of BlackRock? Well, only if Trump doesn't get back into the White House and shut this whole money laundering operation down. Like, isn't that a huge motive?
Yeah, I remember Tucker mentioned something about this on a podcast about how I think we talked about this last week, how, BlackRock's basically rebuilding Ukraine with all of their funded companies. Like that's
Yep.
the plan.
Yep.
So,
And it's out
yeah.
there. I mean, even the New York Times has reported on this. So that would be a pretty big motive because all of that's going to get, I mean, you better believe Trump is going to look into that and there's going to be a lot of questions.
Yeah, and it's like I get it. It's a crazy conspiracy theory shit, but I just don't believe anything's out of the realm of possibility at this point.
Well, yeah.
And
And no
then
one can answer how he got on the roof.
right, and that's the thing. And then there's this questionable scenario of like, okay, not just how he got on the roof, but what happened with law enforcement and how did he go unnoticed? And the when law enforcement was alerted to the shooter being on the roof, we played a clip of the witness describing, what went down in Monday's episode. And so it turns out that local law enforcement officers did attempt to go to the roof to check it out. But what's questionable is the narrative about how it happened. So initial reports made it sound like the officer basically had like an oh shit moment and immediately turned around and fled when he got on the roof and Crooks, turned and pointed a rifle at him. But then the most recent reports are saying that they couldn't get up there because there was no ladder. So one officer was like trying to hoist the other officer up to the roof ledge. And so he didn't have his weapon out and he had both hands on the roof ledge. And so the Butler County Sheriff came out and defended the officer's actions and said that it was the right call to retreat. He said he would have done the same thing. And because he had both hands on the roof ledge, like his option was to duck back down. And that's apparently when Crooks, turned back to the crowd and started firing at Trump. But again, how did Crooks go unnoticed by law enforcement, not even getting into the building, but on his way to the building? Like he's clearly, if he's not carrying the rifle outright, like did anyone mention a rifle bag or anything? I didn't hear anything about that.
No, and
But
you
how
can't
does he
conceal a
go?
rifle from
Right,
like
that's my
a
point.
rally.
How do you go unnoticed in just to even get through the outer perimeter to get to this building? It makes no sense. And every source that has anything to do with knowledge of Secret Service and planning is saying the building should have been part of the security plan, whether it was going to be protected with Secret Service assets or local law enforcement assets. This building should have absolutely been part of the security detail plan, and it wasn't. And so I'm going to play another clip from Megyn Kelly because she did an interview with this guy, Chuck Marino. He's a former Secret Service agent. And he was talking about how the Secret Service and local law enforcement basically failed in their protection protocols.
I think the fact that he made it to the roof and was spotted by a police officer up that ladder and no action was taken is really dereliction of duty if true, but the reporting of a suspicious person with a weapon started much sooner. So it tells me that amongst the investigation, we're going to find that there was a significant gap in communication, because if the president's detail had known that there was a suspect armed who could not be found by local law enforcement within the area, then you would not bring the former president to the stage. You would actually keep him in the armored car until the situation was resolved. So it tells me there's a communication breakdown. But as far as the investigations that are going to come out of this, Megan, I can tell you it's going to expand well beyond just what happened at that site. You're going to see people looking at the HR hiring practices of the Secret Service. You're going to see them looking at training. You're going to look at them looking at operations and resourcing. Was the former President Trump detail given all the resources that they needed to match the threat level? They're really going to be under the microscope, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. They've got a very, very rough road ahead. And right.
Okay. So I think what he said is totally legit. And the Secret Service is being put to the fire with this investigation, because ultimately the bottom line is they're responsible for the entire security plan at these kinds of events. And even if that building wasn't part of the interior perimeter that was protected by Secret Service, they're still responsible for making sure that either Secret Service or local law enforcement assets are strategically placed in necessary areas to protect the outer perimeter. And this building absolutely should have been part of that plan. So it's like you were saying on Monday, Stephanie, was this building intentionally neglected? And now with this information that you just talked about, with the connections between the building and the shooter in Blackrock, like that just makes this even more suspect.
Yeah, and there's no way he's getting anywhere near a rally with a rifle. So it would make sense, though, if the rifle was already in the building because he had access in the building, and it's
Yes,
hidden. I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah. And speaking of him, like the shooter, more information's come out about him since we talked on Monday. And I guess one of his high school classmates was interviewed, and it was so typical, right? He described him as the loner who was always bullied and was like the awkward outcast kid. And he had tried out for the school's rifle team and got rejected, but he belonged to a local gun club and they had a 200-yard rifle range, which, the shot he took was less than 200 yards. And when law enforcement went to his home, they found explosive material at his house and in his car. And then what I thought was interesting is his parents are both licensed professional counselors. Like, how
that
do you
is
not
interesting.
notice that like something's off with your kid?
Right.
Right?
And then that dad is the one that bought him the rifle. And so
Mhm.
it's like, that's
Yeah.
not smart.
Yeah. I'm sure. I guess they're trying to crack his cell phone. And I know that takes a while because I had to do that before, and you have to go through a whole bunch of shit just to be able to do it. And sometimes, even once you have the authorization, like the technology isn't there to do it. But another thing we talked about on Monday was how Trump's security team requested additional security resources and they were denied by DHS. Well, I was reading an article in American Military News, and a DHS spokesperson is saying that this is not accurate. And they stated, quote, in fact, recently the U.S. Secret Service added protective resources and capabilities to the former president's security detail, end quote. So my question is, recently, as in after he was shot or before, right? And Biden also gave an address from the White House on Sunday where he said that he's been consistent in directing the Secret Service to give Trump every resource, capability, and protective measure necessary to ensure his continued safety.
Was
And then
that
the article,
before or after he told everyone to put a bullseye on Trump?
right, exactly. And then the article also stated that FBI officials told reporters on Sunday that their immediate focus was on investigating the shooting itself, not how the event was secured. But eventually, there's going to be a full probe to reconstruct a timeline of what happened and how. And then Biden also said there's going to be an independent review of security. I highly doubt it's going to be independent. But We talked on Monday about how almost immediately after the shooting, the House Oversight Committee called for answers from Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle and DHS Secretary Mayorkas. And Stephanie, tell me if the response from the DHS isn't just like a big fuck you. So the agency puts out this statement and they say, quote, DHS responds to congressional inquiries directly via official channels, and the department will continue to respond appropriately to congressional oversight, end quote.
Can Mayorkas just resign already? Like, how is this guy not in prison? Like, just resign in disgrace at this point. But it's bullshit. It's bullshit because look at RFK Jr. They flat out denied Secret Service protection, which is customary. And
Right.
so now, like, Trump was calling on Biden to give RFK Secret Service, and he did. He finally did agree to give RFK Jr. a detail. And it's just like, everyone is having a field day over the fact that the Secret Service had a big DEI push specifically to hire more women. I mean, it was right on their website, like the pride flags and shit like that. And the picture of the female Secret Service agent that was ducking behind Trump, like saving herself, freezing in the moment, just points to why you need capable people. And DEI should not be a priority when it comes to protecting someone's life. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I started laughing when I was listening to Megyn Kelly because she is like, she's so angry. And she went off in her podcast about like, why was a 5'5" female assigned to protect a 6'3" man on stage at a critical event like this? And it's an open invitation for a headshot. And she's like, this is absurd. And she called it a joke. And like, I have to say, I agree. And maybe this sounds hypocritical because I'm only 5'3" and I worked plenty of protection details like this. Well, not the president like that, but when I was a cop, but I was never assigned to this kind of a critical post, right? Nor should I have been, because no matter how good my training was, it just would not be appropriate to have placed me as a short female in a situation like this. And like, you can call me a sexist. I don't care. I think details like this should be handled by the big fucking buff guys who have the body structure and the weight and everything to be able to effectively protect the president and like quickly get him off the stage if they need to and carry him away.
Well, and Carrie, that's a big thing. His feet never should have touched the ground. Everyone's talking about how he asked for his shoes. They were like, he should have been off that stage immediately and they should have carried him and shielded his body. And I remember when I was watching it, like the one tall guy that was there put his hand on Trump's head to protect his head because there were all these like short, chubby females surrounding him. And we were like, what's up with all these girls? But did you see at the RNC, his security detail when he walked out? Big, buff, scary looking dudes. So, I mean, thankfully, he's got some good protection now. But yeah, I mean, when they were leading him to the motorcade, they weren't tall enough to shield him. And that's just like one issue. I mean, forget the fact that they didn't follow protocol. And yeah, as a woman, like I will flat out say, like, DEI should not be a factor, and especially when the stakes are this high. Absolutely not. It should be men. And by the way, who created DEI? Blackrock. Larry Fink. Just another little coincidence I'm going to throw in there. So I want to play a clip from Dan Bongino, who used to be a Secret Service agent, and let's hear what he has to say about this.
Open security questions right now, and this is why, again, I think the Secret Service, the PR, Anthony Guglielmi, has to be very careful about what they put out. You know, he says in his X post, and you can read it yourself. You don't need to hear it from me. That they deployed these extra resources and technology. Okay, well, which ones? You're telling me the best technology you have was deployed and you missed a shooter 130 yards? Say it was 200 yards. The Secret Service CS team, Pete, the counter sniper teams, and I'm not sure those two guys are Secret Service. We have to remember that we don't always, when we go to New York sometimes with high-level protectees, we'll use NYPD ESU counter sniper. So I'm not really sure either way, they'd still be briefed in. The question we have to ask is, if that's the best technology we have, and we had a CS team up there with a shooter that, you know, we're trained out to 1,000 yards in the Secret Service with the counter sniper team. How did they miss someone at most, you know, 1/5 of the way there? It doesn't make any sense. And even worse, it's broad daylight on a white roof. So again, open questions here. Was there forward-looking infrared deployed? Was there aerial support, drones, helicopters? Something happened too. If you go back and listen to the audio, I want you to listen to this after I get off here. When Donald Trump, after this tragic thing happens, you'll see the Secret Service agents. And by the way, I know some of those guys personally. It takes a lot to run into bullets, divorcing the security failure. So at least they did that part, correctly, and they knew what they were doing after the security absolutely failed. But you're going to hear something if you listen closely. The guy mentions Hawkeye on the scene. He's talking about those two, the black BDU with the tactical gear CAT element, that two-man CAT element. That stands for counter assault team. That's a Secret Service special weapons team, equivalent to our SWAT. So they're there. They all deployed and did what had to be. That the bunting around the front of the stage is probably armor. Donald Trump knew to duck. I mean, most people would. He saved his own life. That's just a fact. The evacuation did not go right. I mean, the rule with the Secret Service is cover the protectee and evacuate. The other rule is maximum to the protectee, minimum to the problem. Why minimum to the problem? Because you don't know that's the only problem. It could be a distraction. There could be another person in the crowd. So if you don't jump on the protectee, you could be looking at multiple shooters. So at least that part, the guys there, stepped up there. But the failure here is absolutely catastrophic. And I got to tell you, the Secret Service should be very careful. I can tell you and absolutely confirm from the horse's mouth, from multiple people, not just one. And I saw Congressman Waltz text this out before on X. There have been repeated requests to increase the security footprint around not just the residences of Donald Trump, but the body itself. And they have been rebuffed. Like I said, I can tell you actual quotes. The Secret Service directors completely failed and candidly should resign today. Kim Cheadle has failed Donald Trump and honestly failed Joe Biden too. He's the president right now. Where's the DHS secretary? I mean, this is, you're blaming it on manpower? So just to be clear, we're a $4 trillion United States government and we can't fork over enough money to keep our people alive? And then you're sending out tweets like, oh, this is the best technology we have. Really? To let a sniper 150 yards away from the potential next president shoot a piece of his ear off?
I thought that was a great point because I immediately thought of Ukraine. We can send them plenty of money and protection and the latest technology to defend them. But no, not a former president and current running presidential candidate. Unbelievable. And good, like that's why I want to hear from ex-Secret Service agents because they know all this stuff and they can flat out say these are all lies. Like it's all bullshit that they're feeding us.
Yeah, and they're going to be hitting this DEI agenda really hard. And so I have to bring up another portion of that interview with Megyn Kelly. And but first, her description when she was talking about the female agents taking him to the car, she said it looked like a bunch of hungover sorority sisters. And she was like, one girl's ponytail's whipping around and she looks like she doesn't even know where she's going. Another one couldn't reholster her weapon. And she was like, none of them inspired any confidence or seemed to be in control or command at all. And they didn't know what they were doing. And like, it would be comical watching it if it wasn't such a serious fucking thing. And so I just want to play another clip that the prior Secret Service guy, Marino, said, because he was talking about the controversy with the Secret Service DEI agenda.
The director of the Secret Service, Kim Cheadle, has created a program known within the Secret Service as the 30 for 30. That is, the director wants to achieve 30% female agents and officers within the Secret Service by the year 2030.
To expand hiring, they're aiming to have 30% women recruits by 2030, and even allowed YouTube influencer Michelle Carre to train with agents.
But I'm very conscious as I sit in this chair now of making sure that we need to attract diverse candidates and ensure that we are developing and giving opportunities to everybody in our workforce, and particularly women.
This program has created great contention within the Secret Service. And some of the questions that are going to be asked of the director is, have standards for hiring, for training, for assignments been lowered to achieve this program? It's a very straightforward question. And now the director is in a position where she's going to have to prove that it hasn't. And I hope it hasn't, but unfortunately, I don't think, speaking honestly, that's going to be the answer.
I mean, it looks obvious. It's so absurd to try to paint this as female empowerment. Is it female empowerment to take a bunch of women who are obviously unqualified for the job and let them publicly humiliate themselves and endanger the lives of a president and his fans? Is that female empowerment? That's a national embarrassment for womankind. No one gets uplifted by such a decision, whether it's on a Secret Service detail or a Boeing plane. Diversity, equity, inclusion have no place in jobs that relate to safety and security. And frankly, they have no place anywhere, but certainly not in those jobs, not in an OR, not in a cockpit, and not in front of the president's protective detail. It's deeply wrong. Look, I used to live in Arlington, and there was a woman in my townhouse unit who was about 6'2" and strong. She was built, and she was a Secret Service agent. And I remember thinking, like, that kind of makes some sense to me. I could see that as long as she's weapons trained and she can do all the other stuff. And then you get the occasional female firefighter who matches that description too. But it's what, less than 0.5%? Those are the only ones who should even be considered. And the women who look like me, who are, on the smaller side and could easily be run over by a 5'7" male, have no business being there, Chuck.
This wasn't necessary. I've worked with females my entire career, and the females that I worked with were fantastic. They were as trained as I was, as capable as I was, both physically and with a firearm. And there was great comfort and trust when you were serving on protection details, of which I served on many. So, to divide the agency like this has not been helpful. But this is where the director has focused since her time as director. And I think that's going to come up, because I don't think the priority of this director's attention has been placed where it needs to be. And that is getting the most qualified people into the agency and focusing on the operations of the agency, which is a no-fail mission. You got to show up to work and get it right 100% of the time, each and every day. The Secret Service is not the type of agency that needs to be kinder, gentler, and softer. That's not it. That's not it. That's not what the Secret Service does each and every day. What you wanted to see with former President Trump being taken off that stage, I can appreciate the visual of the fist raised in the air, but if I'm there, his feet don't touch the ground.
Yeah.
He loses all say on being evacuated from that very dangerous situation. And unfortunately, I fear when it's looked at that the answer was that they were incapable of doing so because they had incapable people around them.
Great point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe this will be the end of DEI, like once and for all. That would be great.
God, I hope so. So, obviously, there's going to be quite an investigation, but I want to bring up something else too. So, I was reading this article in the Daily Caller on Monday, and it was very interesting. The guy made a point about how this assassination attempt on Trump is probably going to have huge repercussions on changing the narrative of the Biden campaign. And we talked about this on Monday about how, not only the campaign, but the entire Biden administration has been focused on Trump being the biggest threat to democracy and comparing him to Hitler, and how he's going to take away women's rights and LGBTQ rights and minority rights. And he must be stopped by any means necessary because, if Trump wins, then the entire world is going to go up in flames. And basically, this has been the Biden campaign narrative, this very dark message, this, language and rhetoric that's clearly been like an invitation to incite violence and division in the country. And then almost immediately after the assassination attempt, the Biden campaign like pulled a bunch of their ads, right? So when I was reading this article, I thought it was a good point because are they going to shift like the their campaign focus? Because when it comes to policy, they don't have a leg to stand on. Their entire campaign is focused on Trump being the greatest ever threat to democracy and all of the horrible things that he's going to do if he's elected. But realistically, the last 4 years of the Biden admin have been terrible for Americans. Biden's policies have just created one crisis after another, from the economy to the border to international relations, like everything. So, what could they possibly highlight other than Trump being a threat to democracy as the narrative? So, after the shooting, Biden reiterated the comments that he made condemning the attack. On Monday, he said that there's no place in America for this kind of violence or any violence. And he added this, like, I think what was supposed to be forceful emphasis at the end by saying, ever, period, no exceptions. But Stephanie, he's also not taking any responsibility for his or his administration's role in inciting the assassination attempt. So I want to play this clip from an interview that he did with Lester Holt on Monday on NBC.
More breaking news. We are right now getting the first glimpse of President Biden's interview with Lester Holt at NBC. Now, this was highly anticipated because it was right after the Trump assassination attempt. And of course, in the context of the questions about Biden's candidacy that are still there, Biden saying it was a mistake to tell donors it's time to put Trump in a bullseye, which was the rhetoric that he had used just days before Trump was shot. Let me play this clip with the president and Lester Holt.
Let's talk about the conversation this has started, and it's really about language, what we say out loud and the consequences of those. You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. That's what I'm focused on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was, there's very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term is bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that one accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win. And so the focus was on what he's saying. And I mean, the idea.
But have you taken a step back and done a little soul searching on things that you may have said that could incite people who are not balanced?
Well, I don't think, look, how do you talk about the threat to democracy, which is real, when a president says things like he says? Do you just not say anything because it may incite somebody? Look, I have not engaged in that rhetoric. Now, my opponent is engaged in that rhetoric. He talks about be a bloodbath if he loses, talking about how he's going to forgive all the, actually, I guess, suspend the sentences of all those who were arrested and sentenced to go to jail because of what happened in the Capitol. I'm not out there making fun of, like, when I remember the picture of Donald Trump when Nancy Pelosi's husband was hit with a hammer, talking about, joking about it.
Okay, first of all, he made no sense as usual. Second, Stephanie, did you hear any semblance of accountability to any of the questions he was asked?
Of course not. There never is.
Yeah, all I heard was excuses. And so, like, I'm so just disgusted by that clip, but I'm also curious as to what is the next move going to be? Because if the left isn't attacking Trump, they literally have a losing agenda.
They already lost. Like, he's done. And as much as that disgusted me, I'm like, what do you expect? He's done. What a real leader would do is say, I'm ashamed of some of the things I've said in the past. If any of my words were taken out of context to incite violence, I'm deeply sorry that that happened. And I'm going to vow to move forward and speak in a united way, like give some type of a positive message. But what is he doing? He's trying to say, oh, it's the guy who was just shot in the ear. It's his fault. Like,
Yeah.
it's so stupid, and it makes him look so bad that he's just done. And every little comment like that him and all these leftists are making, it's really hurting them. So let them keep going. And you have the mainstream media. So NBC pulled the Morning Joe, like MSNBC's Morning Joe program, off the air following the assassination attempt. And they said it was because they were afraid that they would say something inappropriate about the shooting. What does that tell you? It tells you they've fucking incited this assassination attempt so many times on that show and on that whole network. I was just watching last night that Joy Reid that always has stupid comments. She was like, I'm just afraid that this is going to make people forget that Trump is the real one that incites violence. Again, attacking the guy that was just shot, he was almost assassinated. Not a good look. It's stupid. And the network realizes that, and they're getting nervous now. And they're realizing that, like, every little attack, whether it's verbal or otherwise, that they make on Trump is biting them in the ass big time. And it's not a good look. And when you have the mainstream media, along with Democrat politicians and all of these celebrities that have called repeatedly for the assassination of Trump, it looks really fucking bad right now. And they are panicking.
Yeah, and the ones that have kept going and
Mhm.
posted stuff on social media about like, oh, it was too bad they missed.
Yep. Yep. And that's what I'm saying. Like, even like Lester Holt is like finally asking the tough questions. The people that were at the RNC, they seem to be just as much like enamored with the whole make America great again as we are. It's like there are people that are course correcting and doing the classy right thing, but there's a lot of them that aren't, and it's destroying them. Like, it is destroying them.
Yeah,
And
wait. Did you notice that Lester Holt like basically tried to throw Biden a lifeline when he didn't answer the question the first time? And so then he had to go back and say, but in retrospect, like, do you think you could have? And even then, Biden couldn't fucking admit to anything.
yeah, they're still trying to like help this sinking ship.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, you need to get on board with the true leader of this country.
Yeah.
And I mean, absolutely, they have incited violence long before like Trump this ever happened. I mean, this has been going on for years. They've attacked him. And something that is so like crazy, and I can't get it out of my mind, okay? So many people are talking about like how it was so close. If Trump had been killed, they think a civil war would have broken out. And like, just think about it. Like, he had to turn his head at just the right time to be saved in that moment. And so a lot of people are like, that was divine intervention. Like, you know, something was trying to save him. Others are saying they think we shifted timelines because the day after, it's like everything changed. People were uniting. Things felt lighter and hopeful and optimistic. I know I felt it. And it's like we literally shifted. It was like there was this fork in the road, and one way would have been civil war, and the other reality is that like good will prevail and everything's going to be okay. And I know I felt like a huge shift. And usually things like that happen when there's a tragedy or something of that sense where we all come together as Americans, but I feel it. I feel like that patriotic vibe of people that are like full force for Trump and like fuck everyone that's like evil, they're done. Do you feel that way?
I do, but I think because the election's still a few months away, like anything can happen, right? But I do think also that Trump's response after the assassination attempt has a lot to do with how the people are feeling. Because the dude, like, just, I mean, he gets shot, right? But his focus almost immediately was on uniting the country. Unlike Biden, who was playing the blame game and continuing to say that, maybe he should have used a different word than bullseye. I mean, I don't even know what the fuck he was saying. Crosshairs instead of bullseye. Like it's any
I
different.
don't think he
It
knows
means
what
the
he was
same-
saying.
It means the same fucking thing. And, the bottom line is his play is still Trump is a threat to democracy. Meanwhile, Trump's speeches since the incident have been all about using what happened as a way to unite and unify and bring the country together. And, that is the behavior of a true leader. And I hope that, people are fucking embracing that, and that this shift will carry forward for the next few months, because the election is not next week. I mean, there's still time for anything to happen.
Yeah, it is true. But they have nothing else to run on. They never have. It's always been get Trump. Trump's bad. Trump is the big bad orange guy. And what else are they going to go to? They have no record of success or unifying the country, and Trump's handling it great. And yeah, I think this has been a huge, huge shift. And yeah, anything can happen, but the energy feels so different. It feels so optimistic, so hopeful. And I hope it continues. I really hope it continues.
Yeah.
So, man, we covered a lot. And I feel like every second of every day, more and more is coming to light. So we'll just keep everyone posted. But please, anyone that has Apple, go to Apple Podcasts, search Unapologetically Outspoken, and leave us a review, because like we said in the beginning, they're going to start coming for us now. We need to counteract these negative reviews. So it's something that's like quick and it's totally free. It just takes a few seconds. Please leave us a 5-star review. And thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you back here on Friday.